Hilchis Eidus Perek Shmeina Aser. So here in the next 4 prokim, the Rambam is going to discuss the dinim of Eidim Zoymimim. Now, Eid Zoym, there's a musik called the Eidus Vakchosha, Eidus HaMakchishim Zeh, and there's a musik called Eidim Zoymimim. The difference is, there's Rambam tight choice. Eidim Makchishim means 2 people come along and say a certain story, and the other 2 people come along and say the story didn't happen. It was a different story. So Memela, one Eidus is saying one story, the other one is saying no, he's contradicting the story. That's called Eidim HaMakchishim Zeh. Eidim Zoym, it doesn't mean that one is contradicting the other about the story. 2 people come along and say a story, and they say the story happened on a certain day and in a certain place. Now comes along the second pair of Eidus, and they say, I don't know anything about the story. We're not involved in the story. We're talking about you're coming along and you're saying, part of your story is that you're an aid on the story. You're saying you're an aid on the story. You saw the story. We're saying Eidus that you never saw the story. You never saw the story. So now that's called Eidim Zoym, because they're not saying Eidus about the story. They're saying Eidus about the Eidim, that you never saw the story because Imanu Yisem, you were with us elsewhere, so therefore you couldn't have seen the story. And then the din is that we believe the second pair of Eidus, and we don't believe the first pair of Eidus. And the first pair of Eidus are punished for saying Eidus, as we'll learn B'Hamshel, that they receive Kashazomam Lasis Lochiv. Perek Shmeina Aser. Mi Sheheyed B'Sheker. Someone that said Eidus B'Sheker, V'noida Be'edim Sheheyed B'Sheker. And we know through Eidim that they said Eidus Sheker. V'zeu Shenikra Eid Zoym. Eid Zoym means that someone said Eidus, and we know through Eidus that these Eidim were said Eidus Sheker. U'mitzvus Asei Lasislei Kimei Shirotza Lasis Be'eidus L'Chaveri. Now there's a mitzvah I say, first there's 2 pratim over here. The first thing is, when the second pair of Eidus come along, and they say, Imanu Hayisem, we believe the second pair of Eidim, that the first pair of Eidim are lying. That the first pair of Eidim lied. They lied that they saw the story. That's number 1. And now there's another din, that because they lied that they saw this story, and they tried to cause this person that they were saying Eidus about a certain oynish, so they received that oynish that they tried to cause. That's this din, Nachamo. Mi Sheheyed B'Sheker, someone that said an Eidus Sheker. That's number 1. And v'noida be'edim, we know through Eidim, as we'll soon see how we know through Eidim, Sheheyed B'Sheker, that he said Eidus Sheker, is zeu shenikra Eid Zoym. That's called an Eid Zoymim. Or mitzvah say, once we establish that this person is an Eid Sheker, we know through Eidim that he was an Eid Sheker, is mitzvah say lasisle kimei shiratza lasis be'eidus lechaveri. What he tried to cause through his Eidus lechaveri, that's what happens to him. They said Eidus about someone that is chayav skila, and v'huzmo, now they were found to be liars. They were hayed b'sheker. So then the skull and kulan. So all these Eidim that said this Eidus sheker to try to cause someone with skila, they all receive skila. V'im b'sreifa, if they try to cause someone the misa sreifa is nisrafim. V'chein shara misas, any misa that they tried to cause. And lepel, they were found to be Eidim Shakranim, so they received that Eidus, that punishment. The Imhidu b'Malchus, if they tried to cause someone to receive Malchus, is Leike Kol Echad Mem Kishar Mechuyavi Malchus. So each of them received Malchus, Kishar Mechuyav Malchus. And just like every Mechuyav Malchus, you assess whether or not how much Malchus he's able to take and be able to live. Is Ve'emd in Koiche, you assess his Koyach or Malchus. But if the Eidus was trying to be mechayiv someone mammon, so then not each one pays all the mammon that they were trying to be mechayiv. Then is mishalshin hamammon b'neim lefiminyan eidim. Then they divide the mammon according to the minyan eidim. Kol echad ve'echad yitin chelik hamagiele. Each one gives the chelik which he has to pay, and ve'ein leikim b'mkem tashlumin. In a case where they're paying, so they don't end up receiving malchus. Is nachamo. So the Seder Advarim is that if they try to be mechayiv someone misa, so each of them get misa. If they try to be mechayiv someone malchus, so each of them gets malchus. If they try to be mechayiv someone mammon, so then they all together pay that mammon that they try to be mechayiv. And when they're paying money, so then they don't get malchus. Halacha beis. B'medvar mamurim, when do we say that these Eidim were found to be Eidim Shakronim, and then they have to pay what they try to be mechayiv? If there was hazama, which we'll soon see what hazama is. If you have 2 kites which are are contradicting each other. Ve'en kan Eidus, and there's no Eidus because Lepel, each one was contradicted, is ein oinish nesachas mem. So we don't give an oinish to either of them. Lefisha ein onu yedim mihu hakata shakranis. We don't know who is the kata meshakers. No, two people came along and said Eidus about something. Then two people come along and say Eidus, that this thing didn't happen. So we don't really know that the second pair of Eidus are saying the truth more than the first Eidus. And even though the Rishonim ask the Lechuri as a migud, the second pair of Eidus could have puzzled the first pair of Eidus with saying that they're gazlanim or things of that nature. But nevertheless, we don't believe the second pair of Eidus against the first pair of Eidus with a migud. A migud is not going to help to be mavatal the first pair of Eidus. So I'll call upon when you have two pairs of Eidus and they're contradicting each other, we don't really know which one is saying the truth. So therefore it was never ascertained that this one is saying the truth and this one is saying the lie. Now, what would be the difference in Metzias when we say that when two people are makish the first Eidus, so then we don't know which ones are saying the lie and which ones are saying the truth. Masha'inkin, when the second pair of Eidus are being mazim the first pair of Eidus, so then we do say that we know that the first ones are liars and we believe the second ones. Is hakosha is be'edus atzma. When you're having hakosha means you're arguing about the edus, the haggadas edus, the testimony. The second pair of edus are contradicting the haggadas edus of the first pair of edus. The first pair of edus says this happened. And the second pair of edus saying no, it didn't happen. Or the second pair of Eidus are saying something which as a result of that, we know that it didn't happen. The Hazama is not talking about the Eidus, whether this Eidus that they said is true or is not true, but rather the Hazama be'edim atzma, they're talking about the Eidim, not the Eidus. The Elu ha'edim shehizimum, and the Eidim that were mazim, the second pair of Eidus was being mazim, the first pair of Eidim, they're not dealing b'chlal whether or not the story happened or didn't happen. They have no idea whether it happened or not. They're just saying, as we said before, that the Eidim weren't there. No, two Eidim are coming along and said this and this happened. So basically, they're really saying two things. They're saying this and this happened, and we were there. We saw it happen. This and this happened, and we saw it happen. Now, when the second pair of Eidim come along and they say like this, if the second pair of Eidim are saying it didn't happen, no, you're saying it happened. We're saying it didn't happen. So they're arguing about the Eidus. They're arguing about whether this story happened or it didn't happen. Masha'inke, that's called Eidi Akosha. They're arguing about the story whether it happened or not. Hazama means they're coming along and saying, we're not getting involved whether it happened or didn't happen. We have no idea whether it happened. We only know that you weren't Eidim. You didn't see it happen. Because as we're going to soon learn Behemshik, you weren't there to see it. So so that's when the Eidim Harishenim become Eidim Zeimim. Kesed. Eidim Shabo v'Amru. Eidim that came and said, Re'inu zeh shaharigas hanefesh. We saw this person kill this and this person. Oy love him or he borrowed money from this person. B'yein pleini b'mokim pleini. This and this day and this place, this is where it happened. After they say Eidus v'nivduku, and there was already the bdika, so now it was already in this kabel, their Eidus bebezin. Is bo shnayim acherim v'amru. Other two Eidus came and said, no, b'yeim zeh u'b'mokim zeh hayinu imochem v'im elu kol hayem. We were together with you and those other people that you're saying this and this happened. V'lei hayu advar me'elim. This never happened. Lei zeh hareg zeh v'lei zeh hilveh zeh. You're saying a story that this and this happened. We were together with you and those people that you're talking about, and it didn't happen. So over here, they're arguing about the Eidus. They're not talking about the Eidim, they're arguing about the Eidus. So then it's Hareizu Akosha. You're saying this happened, it didn't happen. So that's called Hareizu Akosha. They're arguing about the Eidus, the Eidus that they're saying that this and this person killed this and this person lent money to this and this person, saying we were with you and with them, and we saw that it didn't happen. So that's called Akosha. V'chein, im omru lehem, if they said, hey chatem Eidim kach, how could you say this Eidus? That you saw Reuven kill Shimon, you're saying that Reuven killed Shimon in this and this place. Reuven or Shimon were together with us elsewhere. This Reuven and Shimon, which you're claiming killed someone in this country, was with us in a different country on that very same day. So how could you say that this story happened? So they're arguing that this story couldn't have happened. So in the first case, they're arguing clearly that we saw it didn't happen. We saw it didn't happen because we were there, it didn't happen. Over here, they're saying it couldn't have happened because we were with these people, the person that's allegedly, you're claiming he was the killer, or he was the one that was killed, he was the lender, he was the one that borrowed. All of these people were with us elsewhere, so obviously it couldn't have happened. So again, Harezu Eidus Mekeshes, that's called an Eidus Mekeshes, Shezek Mishamar Lehareg Zezeh, it's like saying we're arguing about the Eidus. We're saying it didn't happen. You're saying he killed him. So the could be I said I was there. We saw these two people. They were both alive. No one killed anyone. Or we could say this person, the killer or the person that was killed, was with us. So obviously he didn't kill him. The Nekudas Advarim is that the second pair of Eidim are arguing about the Eidus. And that's called Eidus Mekeshes. When the second pair of Eidus are saying we were there and what you're saying happened didn't happen, the people were there but it didn't happen, Reuven didn't kill Shimon, or we weren't there but we were with Reuven elsewhere, so we know that it didn't happen. The story that you're saying happened didn't happen. Avalim Omru Lehem, but if the second pair of Eidus say to the first pair of Eidus, Onu ein yedim im zeh harig zeh b'yem zeh b'Yerushalayim k'mei she'atem eimin melei harge. You're telling me that Reuven killed Shimon in Yerushalayim. We don't know if it's true or not. What we're saying, Eidus, is whether the story happened or didn't happen, we have no idea. But we know that part of the story is that you saw it happen. That part of the story that you saw it happen didn't happen. You never saw this happen because you were in Babel on that day. So then then the first pair of Eidus becomes Zayman, and then Herogim, and then they get killed, Mishalman. Because Hail, the Eidim Shehizimum, Leihish Gicho, Al Asm Shel Eidus Klal, Im Emes Hoya Sheker. In other words, they weren't dealing whether or not the Eidus was true or not true. They were only dealing whether these people were Eidim or not. They're not arguing about the Eidus, they're arguing only about the Eidim. So B'chi Haigavna, that's called Eidim Zaymim, and therefore that we believe the second pair of Eidus and not the first pair of Eidus. Now the Rambam continues, Zusha Minotera. The fact that we believe the second pair of Eidus against the first pair of Eidus, that's Gzeres HaKosuv. The first pair of Eidus was 100 Eidim. Now 2 Eidim came along and they were mazim, the 100 Eidim that said Eidus originally. So then is Harei Elu Nenoshim Al Piyam, the first pair of Eidus, all get an Oynish based on the second pair of Eidus. Shashnaim Kimei or Mea Kishnayim, that's the general rule, that Shnaim Kimei or Mea Kishnayim, that din is also by Akosha. If you have the two pairs of Eidus that are being machish each other, it makes no difference how big the pairs of Eidus are, because Shnaim Kimei or Mea Kishnayim. V'chein b'shnei kite Eidim, ha'makishim ezu ezu, ein hilchen acharev, ela es deichen eshneim. So we're deichen eshneim. So B'kitzur, there's a musik called Eidim Mukhoshim, which means the second pair of Eidus are contradicting the story of the first pair of Eidus. And then there's Eidim Zaymim, where the second pair of Eidus are not contradicting the story of the first pair of Eidus, but rather they're contradicting that they weren't Eidim, that they weren't there. Because they couldn't have been there, because Lepeil, Imanu Yisem, you were with us elsewhere. At the end of Halacha Beis, the Rambam writes that the reason why we believe the Eidim Zaym, the second pair of Eidim, Benegeh the Hazama, Hoyel v'Eidim shehizimum leish gichu al atzmi shel Eidus klal im emes hoya ishaker. So when there's Eidus HaKosha, we don't know which one is saying the truth. Mashenke by Miziman, since when the Mazimim weren't getting involved in the Eidus, they were only getting involved in the Eidim, so then we accept the second pair of Eidus and not the first pair of Eidus. The question is, what will be in the case when you have Eidim that are Mazimim, and they say about the first pair of Eidus that Imanu Hayisem, and they're also adding that the story didn't happen. For example, the first pair of Eidus say that Reuven killed Shimon in Yerushalayim. Now comes along the second pair of Eidus and says these Eidim were on that day in Bavel. They weren't in Yerushalayim, so therefore they couldn't have seen Reuven kill Shimon in Yerushalayim. And Grada, another piece of information, is that Shimon happened to be in Bavel. Shimon was in Bavel, so Mamela, it never really happened. So in other words, if they would have just come and said Shimon was in Bavel that day, so they would have been Eidim Smukoshim, they were Makrishim. If they would have just said that these Eidim were with us in Bavel, so they would have been Eidim That would have been Eid Zemim. Now they were saying Eid Zemim Saimul Choshim. So what's the din? Is that the fact that they're also makish takes away from the din Eid Zemim? Or no, the fact that Lepel, they said Imonu Yisem, Memele, they're Eid Zemim. The fact that they're makishim doesn't change anything. So the Lashon Rambam sounds like Hoyel ve'edim sheizimum leish gichu al atzmi shel Eidus klal im emes hoya yisheker. Therefore, they're called Eid Zemim. Masha'enken, if they were makbid also on the Eidus, besides the fact that they're saying they would be sign mazim and sign makish at the same time, so then they wouldn't have a din of Eid Zemim. That's how Achreinim HaMedayik from Lashon Rambam, the Rebbe Kivega also discusses this and explains what's the seichel, that if the fact that they're also mukhish, they shouldn't have a din of Eid Zemim. But not everyone agrees. They say there's an argument between the Shitas Rambam whether or not an Eid Zemim that was also mukhish, does he have a din of an Eid Zemim? That's one deal. Now the Rambam in Halachi Gimel says v'zusha emina teira Eidus achreinim aleidus rishenim gzeres hakosovu. So it's Lashon HaGemara. There's a machlekes in Gemara b'negeya Eid Zemim when he becomes puzzle, whether it's l'mafreya hu nifsal or mikano lahaba hu nifsal. So Rava holds that they only become nifsal not from the time that they originally said the Eidus, but rather from the time that they were muzam. Why? So the Gemara says, Rava says, because Eid Zemim is chidushu, and ein lecha be'el chidushay, so he's only nifsal mikano lahaba. But that's the shita of Rava. Now Lepel, the Rambam Paskin, like Abaya, this is from the Yalkigam, so the Rambam Paskin is like Abaya, the Eid Zemim l'mafreyo nifsal. So l'chur, if Pashas according to Abaya, it's not a chidushu. What would be the seichel that it's not a chidush? What would be the seichel not a chidush? So that is brought down in the Ramban and the Tur. The pshat is azay. On Eid Zemim, the pshat is when you have two Eidim that are saying Eidus about something, one is saying one way, the other one is saying the other way. So obviously we don't know who's saying the truth. There's two Eidim that are being machishas ezeh. Masha'engen, if you have the marshal two people that say about another two people, they were machal Shabbos, for example. So you're not going to say, since they're two people and they're two people, so it's like mukhoshim. They're not mukhoshim. The people that the Eidim are talking about are not Eidim. The Eidim are coming along and saying, these two people were Mechal Shabbos. So we accept the Haggadah of the second people. So over here also, when you have two Eidim said Eidus, so they said Eidus. So now if the second pair of Eidus are coming along and they're arguing about the Eidus, so we said the first pair of Eidus said one thing, the second pair of Eidus said Fakert, so they're Eidim mukhoshim. Masha'enkim, when the second pair of Eidus are not talking about the Eidus, they're talking about the Eidim. So in their Haggadah, there's nobody being makish them. They're coming along and saying, these Eidim, which are claiming to have been in this place and this time, they weren't there. So now they're speaking about the Eidim. So now the Eidim can't argue with them and say, listen, we were there. Because the Eidim are the people that the second Eidus are talking about. So just like if a person comes along and says two people were Mechal Shabbos, they can't say we weren't Mechal Shabbos because they're the subject of the Eidus. So Al Derech over here, B'Nigeya, this story, so they're Eidim, they could argue about the story. B'Nigeya themselves, whether they were there or not, so legabi that, there's a svara to say, Al Kopar, the Ramban says so, and the Tur says so, that's not considered really a chidush that we believe the second pair of Eidus. Because since the second pair of Eidus are speaking about the Eidim, not the Eidus, so legabi, the Eidim themselves don't have a din of Eidus. So Mela, we believe the second pair of Eidim, B'Nigeya, the people, the Eidim, the Eidim are Rishenim, and therefore we accept the second pair of Eidim. So it's not really a Gzeres HaKosov. So even though Rava says it's a Gzeres HaKosov, but the Ramban and the Tur say that Halacha, we know on that it's not really a Gzeres HaKosov. It's because Lepel we paskin the Lemafreyo and Nifsal. Lepel, the Rambam says, on one hand the Rambam paskin is Lemafreyo and Nifsal, and on the other hand the Rambam says it's considered a Chidush. So Vice says the Rambam holds that even Abaya, which holds the Mafreyo and Nifsal, but also he still holds that it's a Chiddush. He doesn't argue with the fact that it's a Chiddush. He just says that even though it's a Chiddush, but Lefel Lacher a Chiddush, that we believe the second pair of Eidim, so the Mafreyo and Nifsal. He doesn't mean to say, he doesn't hold that the argument is whether the Mafreyo and Nifsal or not. And Vice says he holds that since the Eidim said the Eidus, and we accepted their Eidus, so part of the Eidus that we accepted originally was that they were Eidim. That's part of the acceptance of the Eidus. Since we accepted the Eidus, so just like if the second pair of Eidim would come along and argue about the Eidus, so we would say Eidus HaKosha, so part of the first Eidus is that the first Eidim were Eidim. And now then the second pair of Eidim are saying that they're arguing with the Eidim being Eidim, So part of that Haggadah was that they're also Eidim. And Mele, that's considered really Eidus Mukheshes. And the fact that we believe the second pair of Eidus over the first pair of Eidus, that's considered a Chiddush. I'll call upon there's an argument when you get this in you. Nachamal, the Rambam clearly writes, the Rambam on one hand paskins Mafreo Nifsal, on the other hand the Rambam writes that the fact that we believe the second pair of Eidus, Lagabi, the first pair of Eidus, is a Chiddush. So some people want to learn, Gdele Achreinim, that want to learn that the Chiddush is only the Hemshech of Afilo Hoya Eidim Rishein Meyo Bo Shneim V'Yizimum. That's the Chiddush, because Lepel is Shneim Trei Kameya. But L'chura, that's a general Chiddush by all Eidim, because by all Eidim there's a din of Trei Kameya, even by Akosha. But Al Kopar, the Pashtus Lashon HaRambam is that the whole Musik, that we believe the second pair of Eidim against the first pair of Eidim is a Chiddush. That's what the Rambam says. Now there's another Nakud over here also that the Rambam writes. When the Rambam starts off the halachas of Eidim Zayman, he says, Mi sheheyed b'sheker, v'noida be'edim sheheyed b'sheker. So it's noida be'edim sheheyed b'sheker, so that's the din of Eid Zayman. And then the din is that this Eid Zayman, because when noida be'edim sheheyed b'sheker, so maybe he gets kasher zoma. There's also, it says, the Rambam say also be'hamshach, when a person is ba'harug b'raglav. If two Eidim come along and say that Reuven killed Shimon, and Lepel, eventually Shimon comes along, Shimon is boharug b'raglos, so obviously Reuven never killed Shimon. And nevertheless, we don't kill the Eidim, even though we know that the Eidim said a lie. In other words, by Hakchosha, we don't really know that the first Eidim lied, because Lepel is mukhash. We don't know which one is true. Masha'enkin, in a case where we know the first Eidim lied, how do we know the first Eidim lied? So there's one way of knowing the first Eidim lied because they were Muslim, because there was Hazama. And then there's another way of the first Edom lied by the fact that Boharug Baraglos, so we know the first Edom lied. And nevertheless, if there was Hazama, so we know that the first Edom lied because of the Hazama, so then you do Vasisam Lekashazama. Mashenkan, if there wasn't Hazama, it was Boharug Baraglov, so we don't say that we give the Edom Kashazama. And we learn it out from a pasuk, because this whole din of Edom Zayim is only when it was Neda Yedei Edom. That's Lashon HaRambam. Nishahed b'sheker, v'neda be'edom shehed b'sheker. It's not Noida shehed b'sheker. You can have a Noida shehed b'sheker, but not be'edom shehed b'sheker. That's part of the Hilchas Edom Zayim, that it's Noida be'edom shehed b'sheker through the Edom Hamizimim. So then you give the Edom Zayim kasher zoma. Halacha Dalet. Edom Zayim einam tzrichim hasro. Edom Zayman tzrichim hasro. In other words, when they said the Eidus, there was no hasro. They were saying the Eidus in the Pasha, they were saying the truth. The Eidim shehukhshu ulubseif huzmu. First there was akchosha on the Eidim, and then there was hazama. So there would be a svara to say that since they were hukhshu, so l'chura their Eidus at that point in time is not really relevant because they were hukhshu. So later on the hazama is not going to be mechayim kashazama because at this point in time that Eidus really can't do anything. But nevertheless, hareil and haragin, oiloikin, oimishalman. So even though they were first hukhshu, and right now they can't really get killed anyways, before the Hazama, but nevertheless now that they were also Huzmo, is Arel and Narogin, Oileikin Omshalman. Why? Because that Chosh is considered the Tchilas Hazama, El Shadayin Linigmra. So in other words, the fact that we're questioning the Eidus is not really considered that the Eidus became Uis. Again, two Eidim came along and said, Reuven killed Shimon. So l'chura at that point in time, if they're going to come and you'll be mazim those edim, if you'll be mazim those edim, so we say vasisim lekashazam lasis lachav. Now the edim come along and say they were makish those edim. They say Reuven didn't kill Shimon. There's two edim come along and say Reuven didn't kill Shimon. So now really that edus can't be accepted anymore. And now another two edim come along and say, no, these edim that said Reuven killed Shimon on this and this day and this and this place never happened. Couldn't have happened. So the Chura, since it was already Hukhash, so Kilo, the Eidim really no longer there. So Mela, now you're being Mazim Eidim, which really aren't really functional. So we say no, that's considered the process. The process is that the Hakosha was Kilo Tchilas Hazama, Mela Sof Kol Sof, they originally said Eidus. And now Lepel, there was the Tchilas, there was Hakosha, and then there was Hazama. So we can look at the Hakosha as being Tchilas Hazama, and besof that they were huzam, so memela we say vasisam lei kashazomam lasis lochav. Halacha hey, ein mazimnu sa'edim ele b'fneim. By hazama, you have the second pair of edus have to be mazim, the first pair of edus b'fneim. However, u'machrishimus an edim, when you want to be machrish edim, that could be shalei b'fneim and pashtus, because when you're being mazim the edim, you're speaking about the edim. You're saying that the edim are edim shakronim. Why? Because they weren't there. The edim weren't there. You're not talking about the story. You're talking about the edim. Since you're talking about the edim and you want to give a din to the edim, so the only way you could do that is through being b'fneim, because you're going to go ahead and give them the din of kasher zomam. Mashenka, when you bring makrish edim, you're not talking about the edim, you're talking about the eidus. You're talking about the eidus. So since you're talking about the eidus, so therefore you can be makrish the eidus shlei b'fneim, because you're speaking about the eidus. And the edim shohuz mushlei b'fneim harei hukhshu. By hazama, there's also akhosha. When you're saying these edim weren't there, so basically you're being makrish the story. At kol you're saying there's no eidus on the story. So memela, so when you're mazim edim shlei b'fneim, einachinami, you can't go ahead and be mekayim kasher zomam. You can't give them a dim of edim zeim, be mekayim kasher zomam. But I'll call upon the hazama of these edim shlei b'fneim, at least have a din of akhosha. And lefichach emesu edim shehizimum kaidim shehizimum esu b'fneim. If edim that were mazim came along and said they're hazama shlei b'fneim, and we just learned that when you're mazim shlei b'fneim has a din of akhosha. If they're going to go ahead and be mazim also b'fneim, they'll have a din of azama. That's huzmu, that's hukhshu v'achar kach izimum. So we said that even though they were first hukhshu, but nevertheless it's considered azama. But at this point in time, when they were mazim shalei b'fneim, it only has a din of akosha. So now, if those edim that were mazim, the second pair of edus which were mazim, the first pair of edus shalei b'fneim, which had a din of akosha, and now they died, so you'll never reach a yin of hazama. And memela, this edus is a edus mukcheshes. So we don't have any edus. Leficha chemesu edim shehizimum koidim shehizimu esim b'fneim is ein kan edus. We have no edus. Sharei achishu zeh, so we have edus mukcheshes. Since we have edus mukcheshes, so memela doesn't have a din of edus. Halacha vav. Edei nefoshes shehucheshu v'lei huzmu. So you had edei nefoshes, that there was hakosha on the edei nefoshes. Nafilu bo hanerag beraglov. Not only there was akhosha by two edim against two edim, and therefore we don't really know which one is saying the truth. We know for sure that bo hanerag beraglov. So the question is, lechura, these edim, we know they said a lie. So the question is, should they get malchus? The Rambam is not discussing over here whether they should be mekayim kashazom. That seems to be a davar apashut, like we mentioned before, that the Rambam in the beginning says that the whole din of hazama is only when they were huzmu ayidei edim, because we knew that they're liars through edim. But over here, we didn't know they're liars through Edom, but we know they're liars because Bo'hareg Beraglov, Bo'anereg Beraglov, is nevertheless Edom Leikim, Mipnei Shulav Shenitn Lazar's Mrs. Bezin. Because Lepel, you could have gotten Misa for this Haggadah's Eidus if they would have been Huzam. Whereas for Eidus, for lying in Eidus about Misa, you get Misa. And Lepel over here, since you're not getting Misa because Lepel there was no Hazama. On the other hand, so you also don't get malchus. That's what I'm saying. If you don't get malchus for a lav, shenitn lazoris Mrs. Bezin. Avul Bezin, maknes and makasmardas kfi mashiyuru. There's a din of makasmardas kfi mashiyuru. So when they get malchus, als kasher zomam, that's a different din. But they get malchus mitzad the din of kasher zomam. If they would mazam, if they try to give someone malchus, they get malchus. Mashenkin, the question is over here, they should get malchus mitzad the lav of lisan b'reach eid shaker. That's some malchus for saying eid sheker. So now we say that since for this saying eid sheker, they could have gotten misa. It's a lav shenitn lazaros Mrs. Bezin. It's a lav shenitn lazaros Mrs. Bezin. Ein leikenov. Halacha zayin edim zeimim tzrichim hachraza v'heichi hachraza shalahem koisvin v'shelchim b'chol ir v'ir. Pleni upleni hiidu bekach v'kach, that these two people said Eidus, v'huzmu, and they became muzim, they became Edom zeimim, because other Edom came and they were mazim them, and as a result of that, v'haragdom, we killed them, eloku b'fernenu, or they received malchus, or yanashno esim kach v'kach dinim, or they were mechuyev to pay this amount of money. Shenema v'anisharim yishmu v'yiros, a special din, that for people that became Edom Zeimim, you have to have achraza. Rambam holds that the achraza is sai b'negei Edom Zeimim, that you were killed, or that they received malchus, or even if they only had to pay money, nevertheless there's achraza. Which Rashi in Sanhedrin, they bring Rashi in Sanhedrin, Mashpashta Mashmois comes out that the chiyuv achraza of Edom Zeimim is only b'negei Misa and malchus, and not b'negei Mammon. Halacha ches. Chiyuv Edom Zeimim l'shalem b'mokim shechayav l'shalem. The chiyuv of Edom Zeimim to pay money when they're chayiv to pay money. In other words, we're not talking about malchus or misa, we're talking about money. So that chiyuv mammon is knas, who has the din of a knas. Lefichach ein mishalma al piasmo, which is the regular din. The by knas is made the b'knas is potter. Ketzat. Hareshi Idu, they said Eidus, v'nechre Eidusin bebezen, and it was nechre Eidusin, so the Eidus was niskabel bebezen, v'achar kach omru shneim, now they both say, Eidus sheker ha'adnu. The Eidus that we said is a lie, ve'elu zeitzel zeklub, what we said was a lie. That's number one. That's one possibility. Eisha amru, or they come along and say, He adnu al zeh bekach v'kach. We once said Eidus. They come to Bez and they say, listen, we once said Eidus about this and this story, and we were found to be Eidim Zeimim. So the din is Ein Mishalman Al Piyam. Based on that Haidah, they don't pay. And that goes under the category of Meida B'Knas Potter. So since paying for Hazama is a Knas, so Meida B'Knas is Potter. So in such a case, either they said that what we said was a lie, that's what the Rambam said, Eid Sheker Hi'adnu, Ve'ein L'Zeitzel Zeklum, or they said that Hi'adnu B'Bezin Pleni, and Lepel V'hu Zamnu. So again, so Ein Mishalman Al Piyam. Avalim Omru, Hi'adnu Al Zeh. We said Eidus about this person. V'hu Zamnu B'Bez Din Shel Pleni, and we were found to be Eidim Zeimim. And then V'nischayavnu Litli Kach V'Kach, and then we were Mischayev. Bezin was mechayiv us to give this and this amount of money. So now, once Bezin was mechayiv them to give this amount of money, so now it doesn't have a gather of a knasarei, then it's already a chiyuv. So then, harei mishalman shezu heidah b'momen shenigma din litnei. Whereas once Bezin was mechayiv them to give money, that doesn't have a din of a knas, and now they're being made that Bezin was mechayiv them to give the money. And therefore, they're chayiv. If one person comes along and his mate says, I was part of two Eidus, and Memela, and we were said Eidus, and Lepel, we were Huzam, and Lepel Bezin was Mechayivas, and I'm just being moida about my chiyuv, so Memela had Mishalem Chelke, because we learned before the Mishal Shlum b'momen, you divide the amount of momen that they both said, so Memela, they both were trying to be Mechayiv, so two people were trying to Mechayiv someone 100 dinner, and Lepel, one of them comes along and he was made it that they were huzam in this chayav moment, so he has to pay his portion, the 50. That's this thing. So in the Rambam is before that there's two oifanim of the hidah. There's one hidah that they say huzamnu bebezin pleni, and then we say that edim zeim, since it's knas, the moment is knas, so ein mishal al piatzman. Masha'inkin, if they say huzamnu in this chayavnu moment, so then that's considered that they were since they were already in this chayavnu moment, so therefore it's considered that they were already mechuyev moment, and that moment is no longer knas because they was nischayev bebezin. So it's in Mavur, in Rashi also, in Rashi and Makis, it's Mavur that B'emes there's two stages of the Hazam. In other words, when Edom say Eidus, and then they were Huzam, so at that point in time, Bezin paskins that they're Edom Zeimim, and as a result of their Edom Zeimim, we don't believe them. We consider that what they said was a lie. That's stage number one, in Memele the Apostle Eidus. In other words, we accept that what they said was a lie. But Lepel, in order for them to be Mechayiv Mammon, now there's another stage, that the person that they said Eidus about has to go and be Tiveya the Mammon, and then Bezdin has to paskin that he owes him money. It's not the pshat, it doesn't work that once they are established to be Eidim Zeimim, so then Bezdin immediately say, listen, you have to pay Kashazam Lasis Lochav. Whereas the Chiyuv Mammon that you have to pay Kashazam Lasis Lochav works through a tviyah of the person that you said Eidus about. That person that you said Eidus about, he has to come along and be Teveya these Eidim that try to be Mechayiv Mammon, and Bezdin has to be Mechayiv Mammon. So so there's a possibility that there was no tviyah yet, and there was no diun yet, so Bezdin paskin that they have a din of Eidim Zeimim. But Bezdin didn't yet paskin that they owe Mammon, and therefore, B'chiyah Gavna, when they come along and they say Huzamda bebezdin shapleni, but they're not really saying that they were etnas chayiv mammon, that's considered a meida b'knas, and a meida b'knas is potter. When the Rambam says this din, that Eidim Zeim have a din of knas, and therefore ein mishalma piatzman, he says two examples. One example was that they said Eidus and Bezin, they said Eidus and Nekre Eidus and Bezin, and then they come and they said Eidus Sheker Hiadnu, and Memela, this person doesn't really owe the other person money. That was the first case. And the other case was that Huzamnu bebezdina shel pleni, but on the other hand, they don't mention this chayavnu moment. So when they say Huzamnu bebezdina shel pleni, and they don't mention this chayavnu moment, so it's clear. So in other words, they were really Huzam, and therefore their Eidus were found to be Eidus Sheker, But on the other hand, they were never nischayiv moment, and that's the din, like we mentioned, that's considered, since they never went through the stage of being mechayiv moment, so therefore that's considered made of a knasus potter. But in the case when they say that Eidus sheker hi adnu, so Pashas Gemara and the Gemara Makas Daf Gimel, over there it comes out that they're not believed because Kivin Sheigat Shoyin Chezor Magid. So if two Eidus come along and say Reuven owes Shimon money, now they're coming along and they say what we said was a lie, that Reuven doesn't really owe Shimon money. We don't accept the second Haggadah because we say Kivin Sheigat Shoyin Chezor Magid. So how can we deal with them as being Eidim Zeimim? That's one issue. And the Maisa is there's another issue which other Rishonim write, and that is the Rabbi Chananel they bring, a Rosh, that Lepel, since they're saying they're being moida, that they cause someone to have to pay, Shalei al Pidin, they should be chayiv al dinner de garmi. In other words, they were goyim that someone should have to pay money. There's not as din Eidim Zeimim. There's two dinim. There's one din of Eidim Zeimim where if they're found Zeimimim, so then there's a din that they have to pay. They have to pay. That's a new din. It's a knas of Eidim Zeimim. Now there's another case. They were goyim to someone to lose money, and Lepel sin, and they're not being believed that he doesn't owe him money. So mele they should be chayiv al dinner de garmi. Now the Maisa is the Rambam brings down this din as an example of a case where made of a knasus potter. Kilu, we're accepting their hidah, but the problem is only that they're being made. Nos kilu be'emaz del chura there should be a chiyav knas because they're saying that they said sheker. It's just the reason why they're potter is also the din of made of a knas potter. L'chura, the reason why they're not chayiv as Eidim Zeimim because they weren't Eidim Zeimim because they were never found to be a liar. So l'chura from the Rambam comes out. There's an arichos hadvarim in Shach, in the Shach Simen Lamed Ches. But again, Shulchan Aruch he brings down this din. He brings down the din that if Eidim say Eidus, and then they come along and they said a lie, so we don't believe what they said. And then he brings the whole Shakavatari and the Rambam and different Shittas, Pshat and Rambam. But l'chura, the Pshat, the Havanas Hadvarim al Piposhut, is that the Rambam is saying there's two dinim over here. There's one din that taka we don't obviously the Rambam doesn't discuss this din of Kivin Sheigat, but l'chura it's Poshet that Kivin Sheigat Shovei Nechezor Magid. So when two Eidim come along and say that Reuven owes Shimon money, and now they come along and they said they lied, so Reuven still owes the Shimon the money. They can't retract that Eidus. That prat of them becoming Eidim Psulim, Mela, we're not accepting that Eidus, that's certainly not going to happen with the fact that they're going to say that we said a lie, because Kivin Sheigat Shovei Nechezor Magid. But then there's another din, because since they themselves are admitting that they said Eidus Sheker, so l'chura misad this admission that they said Eidus Sheker. So just like if Eidim would come along and say they said Eidus Sheker, they would be chayiv. So they admitted that they said Eidus Sheker. So let them also be chayiv. Let them be chayiv misad the din of Eidus Baldin and become taka Eidim Zeimim. So in other words, it'll come out of Psamod Nedin. The din will be that on one hand they're not really making themselves puzzle because Eino the Mesim Atzmi Rasha and Kivin Sheigat Shovei Nechezor Magid. So that prat of Eidim Zeim won't be. But on the other hand, this din of Kashazam Lasis Lachiv, the chiyuv of paying money, that should be. And now that the Rambam is saying no, that they don't have to pay that because Mitzad made the Beknasis Potter. No, since the whole din of Eidus of Eidim Zeim has to pay is a din of Eidus Baldin, Mitzad the din of Eidus Baldin, that since it's made the Beknasis Potter, so therefore he's Potter. And the Rambam doesn't mention anything about the dinner de garmi, and there's Be'emes a dion in Shitzas Rambam that whether do you have to pay mitzad dinner de garmi because the Rambam doesn't mention it, or they don't have to pay the dinner de garmi. But I'll call upon him. The Rambam is like it's a davar mechudesh. In other words, we're normally used to that there's a mussar called Eidim saying Eidus, then another Eidim coming along and first of all establishing that these Eidim are Eidim Zeimim, knows that their Eidus wasn't true, and these Eidim are become Posel Eidus, and then there's another din Vasisim Lekashazomim. This prat that the Eidim are going to become that the Eidim are going to become Eidim Zeimim in the sense that their Eidus are no longer accepted and they become Posel, for sure doesn't happen through their Hidah. Because Lepel ain't the Mesim Atzmi Rasha and Kivin Sheigat Shovei Nechezor Magid, so therefore they can't retract their Eidus. But on the other hand, since they're being made that they said Eidus Sheker, so nevertheless there should be a din of Kasha Zomam. Now that the Rambam is saying no, that the reason why they're not paid Kasha Zomam is because of the din of made the Beknas Potter. It's not a Pashta Zach. I'm saying there's Arichos over there in Shach and in the Ktsos over there in the beginning of Simul Amet Ches, and Arichos on these Protim.